I would think white oak would be a much better choice just because it wouldn't absorb water.
It would.
I think we better get started here, huh?
Thanks, Mike. I agree. I think it's time. We're gonna, like you guessed, we got some business announcements to go through. We always have we've been introducing a safety minute after the announcements. It's just a short, brief reminder of trying to keep safe in the shop.
Kevin, can you give me the desktop share, please?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Chris.
And no, that's no problem. We'll follow Effie's safety minute, and I'll introduce you again, Mike, and we'll go right into your demo. You take as much time as you need, usually, hour and a half or so. We do follow up the demonstration with a challenge and a show and tell. So we need a little bit of time there at the end of the demonstration so that we can get through that business. I'll probably have a small break kind of in between your demonstration and when we start the challenge, just in case somebody needs to run off to the bathroom or something like that. But let me start out with a welcome to everybody. We're at our August 2020, getting quite used to Zoom monthly meetings. Glad everybody can attend. I think we got a really good demonstration set up for you tonight. Wanted to welcome new members and visitors. I did see some names and some faces scrolling through. So if you are a visitor or a new member, unmute yourself and just say hi and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Mahoney. I'm not really new, but this is the first time I've attended the Zoom meeting. I've kind of been missing in action over the last year, but it's great to be here and looking forward to seeing Mike's demonstration.
No relation.
No, I got a brother named Mike.
Oh, well, every Mahoney has a brother named Mike, I think. Or Pat.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, Pat is a good one.
Nice to have you here with us tonight, Kevin. Do we got somebody else? Let's see. Jeff?
Hey. Yep.
Hi.
Hi, Jeff Julian here. I've been turning for, I think, 3 months now, so joined up the group in June and excited to be here and hopefully get in person soon.
So your head's going to explode with all the things that he's going to show you and the ideas you're going to come up with after this. So nice to have you here.
It's not my first Mike Mahoney video for sure.
Okay, there you go.
Been scoping on YouTube.
All right, it's good to have you. Anybody else? All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm going to start out going through our list of announcements. I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible. Obviously, if there's something that catches your ear and I don't say enough about it, talk to one of the board members or shoot us an email and we'd be happy to elaborate more. Wanted everybody to know that we're continuing the open shop in August, but we are still keeping a limit of the shop to 10 persons, and please use the sign up genius to reserve a spot. It lets us know that we're not exceeding that 10 persons, and it also gives us a little bit of a documents who was there. So that's very helpful, and I appreciate everybody that's been using it. Wanted to again thank all of our shop openers for sticking with it and getting us through and keeping our shop as open as we can during the pandemic that we're dealing with. Everybody should know that the shop was cleaner. It seemed to be kept a little bit better in July. So want everybody to please continue, the folks that are using the open shop, to keep that shop as clean as we can. We got fewer people using it, but the whole shop gets dirty. So keep that in mind when you're cleaning up. the wood art that was on loan at the Discovery Center and kind of got left there during the pandemic because the Discovery Center was closed. Sean has picked those items up and they are in the shop. So anybody that did have items there, Ed, I know you were in there, and anybody else, those items are in the open shop in the tubs, so they're on the main table. Feel free to go in and pick your items up and take them back home with you. An exciting development that we've been trying to get up and rolling, and was looking for somebody outside the board. Wasn't getting a whole lot of, nobody was knocking on the door, surprisingly, but Ann Molina and Sean McMahon, both board members, are working right now diligently to create a Etsy website for our club. The goal is to get it up by September, and more information to come. They are working hard, and if you get a chance, thank them both, because that's some extra time put in to try to get this thing rolling, and then hopefully it'll kind of take care of itself a little bit after we get it up and going. Let's see, I did have somebody mention that the Powermatic bandsaw during open shop, if you're using it, there is a tension release, and from what I told, if you release the tension on it, it'll help the tires on the wheels last a little longer, and it help not create some flat spots on the tires. With that in mind, anybody that is using open shop and sees some maintenance need, please don't just disregard it. If you let one of the board members know, at least we can bring it up at the next board meeting and try to take care of it. Jack, if you could go to the next slide, please. Just want to remind everybody that if you use Amazon, we do have, through the Amazon Smile program, we do have a way to source donations from a sale to KCWT Woodturners. So take a look. I think it's usually, the information's usually in the wood chips, or if you can't find information on, I think there's some on the website, but if you're needing information, can't find it, just email the club and the board, or even myself, and we'll make sure we get you that information. Let's see, kind of one of the big events, Mark Inman is spearheading, and we've been trying to get this thing rolling, and the pandemic hit right at the wrong time, but we are going forward with a Freedom Pins event to support pins that are shipped over. We turn them, we make them, we write a little bit up on them in regards to what kind of wood or what the finishes were, or why we made them, or what we want them to know. Put that in a baggie and send them off to the troops that are overseas. We decided, I had said last month that we were going to pick up pin kits any Saturday in August. I did have somebody stop by this past Saturday and pick a few kits up. But we decided to change that to one Saturday, August 22nd. But if you have a problem getting there on that date, please let us know, and we'll make sure you can get some kits and some. We've got kits being the metal pin parts, and then we do have some pieces of wood if you need those. You will need to kind of provide your mandrels and the bushings, and you'll need a 7mm bit and things like that. So if you have any questions, please either talk to Mark Inman, or if you wait till September, our meeting, we're going to have a demonstration on pin turning by Sean McMahon. So you'll get more information then, but please, if you have any questions regarding that, contact the board or contact one of us, and we'll let you know. Finished pins will be turned in October on Halloween, the Saturday morning of Halloween, October 31st. So you got plenty of time. If you're wanting multiple kits, that's fine. Just be sure that you're not taking more than you can finish, because we do want to get as many back into the program as possible. More information will come on that probably as that next month's meeting. Mark Inman also has provided the shop with a pressure pot. It's on a rack underneath the one of the racks that are covered up. It's there. I would say if you want to use it, you're using it, and keep in mind you're using it at your own risk. But if you do want to use it, let somebody know when you're taking it out, so we kind of know where it's at and can keep track of it. But it's there to play with, so please take advantage of that if you're interested. Next item here is Sean is working hard to try to organize some kind of Christmas sale with or possibly without the woodworkers involved. More information will be coming, but he is looking for any assistance in kind of how we can get the word out via cheap advertising or social media exposure somehow. So if anybody has any experience with that, I know what age of folks I'm talking to here. So maybe you have kids that have some experience with that. Maybe they could help and assist Sean with trying to get the word spread out on that. All right. Okay, just again, want to mention that there's plenty of club member support opportunities. If you've got time and want to get a little bit more involved, please let us know. Obviously, we can use some assistance with the Etsy site once it gets up and rolling. Sean would love to have some assistance pulling together the monthly wood chips that, you know, we all like to read, but it does take some time to put together and find the content for that. So any help there? And I want all of you to, especially if you've never been involved on the board, consider becoming a member at large on the board and just sitting in on some of the board meetings and kind of find out how things roll and how we get things to happen. And you'll be surprised how many opportunities there are for helping out here and there and really keeping our club the way we like it. And I'm hoping we can get more and more back into the social atmosphere that it always was, and we know that it can be. Hopefully in the future we'll have that opportunity sooner than later. Kevin Neely runs among a million things that Kevin Neely does. He also is our webmaster and wants everybody to know that he has a section of the website set up for member pictures, a couple of their favorite, or one or two of their favorite projects with the person. So it's a nice way to kind of brag a little bit and show things to the other members and people that visit the website. I do notice I'm getting a connection slow, so I apologize if I'm blipping out, and if you lose me, just go right into the demo. It'll be fine. But I got a couple more pieces of information here. Everybody needs to take a look at Rick Bywater's Japanese Cherry Bowl, which is our August silent auction piece. It's beautiful, and you still have an opportunity to have it in your house. So we'll be taking bids on the Cherry Bowl Friday. So please take an opportunity, check out where it's at in bidding, and if you really like it, you should bid on it. Thanks again, Rick, for providing it. Next month's silent art auction is going to be unique. It's going to be provided by the Top Guys, which those of you that have been involved with Kansas City Woodturners know that that's a group of our guys that pretty much dedicate a lot of their time to turning tops and then providing those tops to the Ronald McDonald House. right now, I think, as far as I know, the last I heard from Jerry Darter, we've got a hold on being able to provide them to the Ronald McDonald House because of the pandemic. So we're just gathering them up, and when things open up, we'll get them a really big donation the next time. But the top guys are going to provide a kit that has everything you need to make several tops, including a spindle tool with a handle by none other than Jerry Darter. That's probably worth about $1.5 million. So please take your time, take a look, bid it up. That's a fun project. It'd be fun to involve another family member in top turning. Okay, that was as fast as I could get through it, and I'm sorry I tend to ramble sometimes, but I wanted to, there are a lot of important points to be made, and without being able to get together in a big group, this is my best opportunity to let everybody kind of know what's happening. If I missed anything, or if you have questions on anything we've talked about, feel free to contact the board. I think my email, it'll come to me at prez@KCWT. I can't even remember, but if you looked on the website, you'll be able to find the specific contact information to get a hold of the board and ask questions and know if you've got any concerns or anything also. I think that's the end of what I've got written down here anyway, prior to our demonstration tonight. But as always, as we've been doing the last few months, I want to take an opportunity for our good friend Effie to provide this month's Effie's Safety Moment video. So Kevin, if you could allow Effie to share his screen.
Actually, I don't have anything to display. I just want to make it short this time and let you know that safety first, make sure that you pay attention to safety. And if it feels something that is wrong, think again and see how you can be safe. One tip I will add here is that when you make sure when your hands are always behind the tool. So if you turn something like the 3 corners cube that Jack Carson demoed, make sure that your hands are behind the tool. So this time it is short. Just make sure that you consider safety first.
Thanks, Effie. That was perfect. I asked Effie if he could get a brief minute in there because I wanted plenty of time for the demonstration. So without further ado, I will mute myself and I will turn the mic and screen. I'll ask Kevin to turn it over to Mike Mahoney. Mike, welcome to our club. We're excited to see what you have to show us tonight, and the screen should be yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, good evening, everybody. I apologize. I'm also getting an unstable internet connection, and I watched Chris talk there, and I was having difficulty with him. I'm hardwired into my Wi-Fi, which I don't typically have any problems here, but I apologize for the slow connection. It could be the fact that I have another cell phone here connected as well, so hopefully all that goes away and we'll be good. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for having me, coming to you from rural Northern California. And anyway, I'll give you a tour of my shop. I'm a production bowl maker. The majority of my work now is I rough turn work for other wood turners, platter blanks and bowls, walnut bowls and white oak platter blanks. And I only use wood that's sourced right around the area here, and obviously for good reason that there's a lot of it. Anyway, I'm going to go onto my cell phone here, and we won't ask for questions yet, but I'm going to, let's see if I can't spotlight my video here and switch. Now, I think you can, we're going to get a little feedback. Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
We can't hear you now.
Because I was muted. Okay, so I think we're okay. Let me give you a tour of my shop. You guys hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. Let me give you a tour of my shop. Let me turn the camera here. This is where I'm working from tonight. There's my little computer there. On the wall there is another computer, and that's a drawing program. I'll be able to draw over the videos that we'll be watching. And we are inside my shop, and this is kind of the clean area. I don't work, I don't turn indoors. I'll show you kind of a quick, slow turn. That's a wine barrel full of Zinfandel wine, and there's another, that's a Malbec in there, which all grapes that grow here on the property. There's some white oak platters, literally white oak. The white color is from the sealer that I put on. It's a product called Tree Saver, which is polyvinyl acetate, which is basically Elmer's glue. So these platter blanks will be, I'll show you the finished product here in a minute. These guys here are peppermill blanks. You see a cracked one here. I pulled that out. It's really hard to dry thick pieces of wood like this without cracking, but if I do it slow, it's easy to do. More platters on this side. This is a little caddy here with a bunch of hollow forms in it. These guys will be burial urns someday. I take commissions for doing burial urns. Let's see, in this box are a project I'm working on. These are drinking cups that haven't, they're just kind of roughed out, and now they're just drying in there. Let's come around here. Yeah. Underneath every table in here is more blanks. Like I said, this is the majority of my income is selling these blanks to other folks, and they can make their own products. And you can come around here. Those are this winter's walnut bowls. There's a few hundred bowls down there. And then more bowls over here. The inventory is going really fast. We shipped out 8 boxes of bowls today. These are my higher end bowls here. You can see the really high figured cottonwood there.
You make it yourself, or you have some people to help you?
I have a young man that helps me cut the wood. Yeah. I should show you, go back to show you this. This is a little chamber here, and I took the top off. It's basically a cardboard box, and those bowls are drying in there. They're oak burls, and I didn't want to seal them with a green wood sealer, so I just stuck them in this little micro environment. Something interest maybe some other wood turners, but that's how I would dry those in that. Look at, a lot of folks don't know I make these kind of sculptures out of just odd burls. This is a black oak burl, which is a red oak, and these are finished drinking cups here. That's a right-hander's cup. That's called a Kuska. Then this is production work here. This is typically what I would work with every day. California walnut here on the right, and on the left side is the graft line. And that graft line is where the English walnut or Iranian walnut is attached to the California walnut, which is a major agricultural industry here in California. Here's a cottonwood. It's too good to sell. How highly figured it is. And here's our white oak here. This is quartersawn white oak. This will be the first thing we talk about tonight. This is what the wood looks like before it gets gassed. And over here is the gas version. So you can see by gassing it with common ammonia, I put that in a little trash can container with a drinking cup and fill it full of ammonia. And in about 24 hours, it gasses the wood into this darker color and really highlights the medullary rays. And that's why it's done that way. And just so that's what it would look like without the gassing. That's what it looks like with the gassing. I prefer this. I think it's superior look. Let's let me take you out and show you where I work. Living here in Northern California is very temperate. We don't get real hot and we don't get real cold. Here's my shop. I work out here underneath my porch. This is my summertime area. In the wintertime, I move these lathes to the other side because the winter sun really tears me up. This is my production machine here. That's a big, heavy Vic mark, and then a more common Vic mark for my vacuum truck there. You can see my property off in the distance there. Very rural, as I said. Let me show you hopefully I can show you this. There's my bowl maker sign. And then that's one of my gardens up there. I've got a pistachio orchard off in the distance. The house is way out there. And then coming back around, you can see my vineyard. And you see a kitty cat underneath the pickup truck. And then my bandsaw and a few other things, a little quartersawn oak pieces. And my wife just drove up. Back in the shop here. Sorry, I hope I'm not boring everybody. More wine barrels here. Those are empty, but they'll be filled up this fall. I've got lathes in just about everywhere, and the table is a mess. I'm sorry about that. But,
what does the humidity run in your shop?
I bet you about 40%. I'm going to turn us off here. All right.
Are any of those barrels full of walnut oil?
Say that again?
Are there any of those barrels full of walnut oil?
No, there's not. The walnut oil is made in the Sacramento area, which is about an hour and a half from here. And it's produced in a factory, and then I put it into totes, which are 250-gallon containers, and then we bring them up here and we put them through a heating process, and the liquid through a heating process, and then filter it and then bottle it, and that becomes the utility oil that is my namesake apparently. Yeah, so thanks for the question though. Anybody have any questions on the tour? Let's see, you got to hold your space bar there.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Hey, where do you live in Northern California?
Like I said, about an hour and a half east of Sacramento. Let me show you. I'll give you just a quick show of where. Let's see if I've got an introduction video here that kind of shows my home. There's the property I just showed you here. This is gold country. Back in 1849, this area would have been ripe with gold miners, and there's a river that runs through this property here called the Consumnes River, which is the only navigable river in the state of California that was never dammed. And off in the distance there, let me show you. That's my house right there, and that house was the first home in this area. It was built in about 1880, and it's kind of a kit house. And the trees that you see around here, those are all black walnuts or our Claro walnut. There's a great history on those trees. Some of those trees are 6 foot in diameter. They're very big. And when gold miners struck out in the fields, they actually, in 1890, when the rail was put across the country, they chopped these trees down. And probably everything you see in that image right there was probably walnut trees. But now they're gone, and they would have shipped those walnuts to New England for the furniture makers because Claro walnut was more sought after than the Juglands Niagara that grows my home and things. So that's the house that I rebuilt. I live in that house now. We had a mountain lion in the basement. Everything was falling down, and my wife and I restored that. It took us about 2 years and a lot of gray hair. That's what it looks like now. A lot of rattlesnakes to remove. There's my shop that I just talked to you. I'm talking to you from. I built the shop with timber here on the property. We have an incense cedar that's perfect for siding, and that's what I sided that barn with. And that's what it looks like in summertime. There's the interior of the barn. It's all mortise and tenon. There's a neighbor. I see a lot of big cats here, again, because the area is not developed and it has never been. The farms here are generally anywhere from 500 to 1,000 acres, so there's not a whole lot of folks out here. Okay, so I just stop share for a minute. Anybody have any questions on anything else before we get into the program? All right, everybody's pretty quiet. So a couple of people asked, at least the board was asking, that we should talk about making heirlooms. And I basically made a video on that subject, and it's really, it's an interesting concept, and it really just consists on when you're making anything in your craft, whatever that craft is, and then of course wood turning is the craft we're talking about tonight. Is how are you going to make your work last beyond your lifetime? And there's a lot of different ways to do that, of course, and that's generally using a timber that is appropriate for the project you're making. For instance, I've got a dinner plate here. This is a piece of myrtle, which is a western wood, and it's a very soft hardwood. It makes for a great dinner plate, and if we had a little bit better high definition video, you could see 25 years of cut marks on here from being used in my kitchen. You can't just make a dinner plate out of any type of wood. You have to really think about what type of wood would be good for this. Well, I would say a soft hardwood, something that takes shock absorption really well, something that can take scratches and cuts, and if you dropped it, it didn't shatter. Because some woods, like let's say black locust, that's just, probably relatively common wood to you folks, if you made a dinner plate out of that, it wouldn't take the normal shock of daily use. It's not a good wood for this project. Just like maybe you had a piece of rosewood that you bought, and it's 1 inch thick, maybe by 12 inches, and you made a dinner plate out of it. Again, it'll make a beautiful plate, but it's kind of inappropriate for its particular use because of rosewood's inability to take shock. So you want a wood that can take shock absorption really well. So making it pretty, making it out of the proper wood, good design, the correct finish, more importantly, are all things that really will make heirlooms. Because again, just going back to this dinner plate, which isn't a whole lot of anything, you wouldn't put a varnish or a lacquer or a film finish on this dinner plate because you'd cut that finish right off the surface. So those are inappropriate finishes for this particular item. Just for, you guys were talking about pens in the introduction. There's a pen finish out there made by Mylands. That's a friction polish, and it's a shellac base, which really, in my mind, is not a good quality, and it generally comes off on your fingers while you write with it. So it would be better if we had something else. I think, did you guys catch all that? I had a little bit of internet connection problem. We okay? Anybody want to chime in?
Yes, you're okay.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, very good. So that would be my discussion on heirlooms, and I do have more to talk about, but let's look at a video and talk about quartersawn white oak. And I love the subject of oaks in general because oaks have such a long history with humans, not only did most humans up until a few hundred years ago, ate acorns to stay alive. But the timber itself to make weapons and our homes and boats and things, we've got a long history with the oak tree. And I have a long history with it myself, because I think in generally, many of us woodturners are not using oak as a wood in our shops. And I always think the reason for that is because it's ubiquitous. It's always out there. It's there. Even though Kansas City may not have a lot of oak trees, but you do have red and white oak trees there. But a lot of people wouldn't use them for a couple different reasons. And I think mostly it isn't that pretty unless you quarter saw it. And when you quarter saw it, it becomes fantastically beautiful for just a very common wood. Let me share my screen here and let's watch a video on that subject. Let's get this out of the way. And this video here is on making quarter sawn oak platter blanks. And we're just going to quickly talk about how you tell the difference between a white oak and a red oak, and why would that be important in the first place. As a wood turner, I'm probably not using red oak at all, because red oak has, all trees have vessels that run through the wood. Red oak transpires moisture and water, and it tends to rot. And so if you made a dinner plate like I just showed you here out of red oak, anything liquid that you put on it would be on the underside of the wood. It'll travel through the wood. White oak doesn't allow moisture transpiration, so white oak is a better choice. Just like the wine barrels I showed you here in the shop that hold my wine, those are quarter sawn white oak, and they wouldn't use a red oak variety. And having said that, there's 450 species of oaks around the world, but they all fall under two categories, red oaks and white oaks. And what you're looking at now, that leaf is a white oak leaf, and you can tell a white oak because it typically has soft lobes on the outside. Red oaks are pointed. We'll look at some of those. So if your neighbor cut down an oak tree and you wanted to know what kind of oak tree it is, besides its common name, you need to know if it's a white oak or a red oak. And this is how you'll tell. There's your red oak leaf. Again, typically always a point. And you know, there's so much variation in oak leaf structure anyway. Because I mean, if you think about it, and I don't want to really get too deep into the oak tree, because if you're a tree expert or somebody who loves trees like myself, I'm always out in the field trying to identify the trees. And the oak trees are very difficult to identify because they hybridize with their neighbors. And they create offspring that's different from the parentage. So sometimes it's very difficult to tell what type of oak you have, but you can almost always tell the difference between white oak and red oak. Hopefully that helps. Anybody have any questions on that?
The burl oak has the rounded leaves, doesn't it?
Yeah, bur oak is Quercus megacarpus, I believe it is. I could be wrong there. If there's any oak experts out there in the crowd, let me know. But you do have a bur oak, and I believe it is a white oak.
Does black oak fall into the red oak category?
Well, you know, the common term black oak, we also use that term out here in California, but it is a red oak. Ours is Quercus callagii. And it is a red oak, and it's a beautiful tree, by the way, one of the prettiest trees we have out here. But when we refer to common names like black oak, your black oak is probably nothing like my black oak. But again, it's just a common name. A lot of people use, and it's very common that, and there's no reason that anybody should have to learn the scientific names of these trees, because all it's important is that you know what it is in your mind, because once you can recognize it, you can understand it. But where that falls down is with a discussion like this, because without the the scientific terminology, we may be talking about two different trees or two different species for sure. But that's why you might be interested in knowing the scientific names, because knowing the scientific names is also learning history. Quercus means, I think, grand tree, and the species, so the family is typically the first name, and then the species is the second name. So Quercus kelloggi, the black oak in our area, Kellogg was a gentleman who was an early botanist who traveled the West and identified that tree first, and that tree was named for him. And so if you're interested in Kellogg, do a little research on him. You might find an interesting character that would turn you on into some other historical aspects. Any other questions real quick? As you can tell, I talk way too much about oak trees. So you're looking at an end grain of a white oak tree that grows right here where I live. Looking at the difference between white and red oaks, they're generally hard to tell wood-wise. What's important about what I'm talking about here is you're looking at the end grains of an oak tree, a white oak. Oak trees are very strong with a thing called a medullary ray. All trees have medullary rays. Oaks just are very strong with it. And you can see this line emanating out of the pith. All those black lines in that area are medullary rays. So if you can slice with the medullary ray, so for instance, if I want to make a platter blank here, let's just say this piece is 36 inches in diameter, which it is. This is a very big piece of wood. There's going to make an 18-inch platter right there that's, say, 2 inches thick. And this is the quarter sawn part of the wood. The other quarters are this. Here, you can also refer to it as rift sawn. And there's a quarter there. So there's your true 4 quarters. And now you can also get more quarters coming this way. As long as you're staying with that medullary ray, you're gonna get a quarter sawn or a rift sawn look. And we'll look at that wood here in a minute. But look what's going on right here. The annual rings are basically going through our platter blank or our board in straight lines. So when this piece of wood dries, it doesn't cup or warp, it lays flat. That goes back to the issue of heirloom, making something that's going to lay flat over time. So if I clean this off and made a platter blank here, now you've got annual rings really elongated into that board. This board is going to cup and warp, and therefore your item that you make is not going to be nearly as useful or as coveted in the future because of its warping. So this is something to think about when you buy wood at the hardwood store to make your platter blank. Make sure that it's quarter sawn so it will lay flat and your work will endure the test of time. Now, other things that are considered why many folks may not use oak trees because it cracks. But it doesn't have to. It's just the way you dry your wood. If you made a bowl, let's say just out of the half log here, now don't think that this is a 36-inch bowl. You certainly are welcome to make a 36-inch bowl. I made one time, I never did it again. I don't like anything in my shop creating wind. So anyway, big bowls are fun once. There's so much surface area, so much strength that need to be cutting a wood that big. Anyway, let's just say this is 12 inches, but digressing here. Now, the heartwood of the tree here is the dead part. There's not a lot of live cells here. And it's probably about 15% moisture. And I'm just throwing that number out. I don't know what it is. But out here in the sapwood ring, you're looking at 65% water. So what happens when these two heartwoods and sapwoods are mixed is a different drying quality. So the 15% area isn't going to move a lot, and the 65% area is going to move a lot because there's a lot more moisture to shrink. So what happens is you'll tend to get a split here somewhere near the pith area or the center of the heartwood, and then you probably get some cracking down into this area here. Now, that all could be mitigated by how you dry your wood. So when you think about how wood dries, so for instance, if this particular tree that you're looking at there, that tree fell down in a windstorm, and instead of going right after that tree, I let it sit for about 3 or 4 or 5 months and sit right there on the ground, and all the free water in the tree gets evaporated. And so the wood is not the same when it was freshly felled. When it was freshly felled, the wood was young and it was vibrant. I'm using terms that we would use for thoughts like this. And it's kind of springy and it's youthful in the sense. But when the wood sits dead and starts to season, we call that seasoning, all the free moisture wisps out of the wood, and then it's just slowly drying. And while that's happening, the wood fiber is stiffening up and creating a structure, and it's not splitting or cracking per se. So that's the same thing when we take a bowl or a platter. What we want to do is slow up the drying process so the moisture doesn't wisp out too fast and create a collapse. So you want to slow up the drying process, and you do that through all kinds of different methods. You could put it in a paper sack, a plastic bag. You could seal it with a sealer of some sort. Just slowing up the process is making the ability to keep your wood from cracking better. Because I don't make anything with cracks in it. And you guys had a little safety talk before we started when you have cracks in your work, especially ring shake and things like that, you're really peaking the danger factor. So I like to always say I don't cut wood with cracks in it, and if it does have cracks in it, I remove those cracks or I turn it into firewood for sure. Let's go back to Sharon's. Anybody have any questions? So we looked at and let's take a look. Let's go further on in the video and look at what the quartersawn is. You're going to be taking down the tree. The tree had already fallen. This is a 9-foot diameter oak tree. If you didn't hear me, I had an internet connection problem there. A 9-foot diameter oak tree, and this is just a piece that fell off of it. And this is our valley oak, we call it there. There's your medullary ray. I'm pointing right at it. And I'm going to run my saw right through that and I'm trying to hit the same medullary ray 16, 18 inches away, which is very difficult to do, by the way. But when you do it, it's spectacular. The grain pattern is spectacular. So here you are. You're just watching me out here in the wintertime cut this tree. I'll speed us up here and get us to our shop. There's your medullary ray again. Just overemphasizing what that looks like. Now, other oaks have stronger medullary rays. Some are thicker, some are thinner. The thicker they are, the better for figure, for this little flecking that I'm going to show you. So that's slicing through there's your flecking. So that's what I'm talking about. So each one of those are the sides of medullary rays. Okay. So on to, let's speed this up and let's kind of show you the process. I tap a nail into the center of the blank. Let me speed this up. Now we go to the lathe. I screw a hole right in dead center and use a screw center. That's how production people typically work. So we're twice the speed than we normally should be, but there's really not much to watch here except me kind of roughing this platter. Now some folks would say, well, why do you rough it into a platter blank? Why can't you just dry the piece of wood the way it is? And the reason is you're going to be a lot better off by giving it the shape of the platter and removing some thicknesses here for the drying process. And I'll explain a little bit further on that subject here in a minute as we keep turning this down. This is the back side of the platter blank. This particular blank is, I think, about 16 inches in diameter. So the base of this piece is going to be about 8 inches. So a platter typically would have a 50% base. So a 20-inch platter would have a 10-inch base, and so on. 16, 8, you get the idea. Again, that goes back to the heirloom issue. You've got to get your bases correct so the piece will be functional. You can make a really small base on these platters, and it gives them a lot of elegance, but it takes away from their utility. Watch what my gouge does right here in a second. I'm just kind of scooping off the front. There you go. And what I'm doing there, this goes to the drying process. When it goes through the drying process, instead of leaving it as a right angle, I round off the edges so they'll dry better. And I do that on all my bowls, all my pepper mill blanks. Everything gets a round edge. This sharp edge right here will be removed into a softer edge when I finish off this platter. I don't want those sharp edges because this area here is a tension surface, and it dries faster than the other areas, and it has a tendency to crack and move a little bit more than you'd want. So any questions on that, anybody? Now I'm just scooping out the interior of the platter. You can see the free water coming out on my gouge. There's a lot of water in this, even though it sat for months before I actually turned it. All right, now you can see the flecking. Now it'll go to the drying room. We'll talk about that here real quick. So that's quartersawn oak. It's, in my mind, one of the prettiest pieces of wood you can find, and it's very common. So here I am applying the sealer. This is basically Elmer's glue. I mentioned polyvinyl acetate. The common name for this is called tree saver, but it is glue, white glue. And I like it as a sealer because for a couple reasons. It's not slippery like the Greenwood sealer or the anchor seal. It does seem to stiffen the fibers of the wood when it dries. So you're kind of winning the battle of the drying process just by stiffening the fiber. So there you go. A lot of people typically would have questions on this about now, but I haven't heard anybody, but open it up for questions if anybody's got one.
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to ask about the time between cutting down the tree and then also going to turn it. Are you suggesting that it's better to wait that period there for oak to dry, do that initial drying over a couple of months before cutting it into blanks and turning it? Or do you like
Yes, I would always advocate to let the wood sit and season for a while for any species, of course. Unless you were doing a turning that would require something really fresh, like a nice thin bowl. If you wanted to have fun, get your wood nice and fresh and freshly cut. You can cut some really nice thin bowls that way. The longer it sits and seasons, the little more difficult it's going to be to cut thinner work because the wood isn't as structural as it seasons.
Mm-hmm. And then with the end grain sealer, do you usually cover the entire platter or a bowl as well, like the entire roughed out bowl? Or do you tend to leave the inside undone? You do?
Everything gets done inside and out, and there's two reasons for that. Number one, I'm not in a hurry. And two, I have a young man here that helps me in the shop that helps me paint hundreds of these at a time. And instead of guessing that he knows where the end grain fiber is, I tell him to do the whole thing, and that way we solve any thoughts of knowing where end grain is. So yeah, that's the way I've always done it, and it's just because I'm not in a hurry. All these pieces that you see here in the shop were thoughtfully done in January, and I do all my processing in the winter months because chainsaw work you don't want to do in the summer for catching fire somewhere, but just the physical labor of the chainsaw. Everything's done in the winter, so we can stay relatively cool and then process the wood a lot easier too, because if it's hot outside, you're going to have to worry about cracking. And where I live, which I didn't quite mention, the weather that I have here, we have 2 seasons. We have dry and we have wet. And starting at about November 1st, the rains come, and the rains come for until about May 1st. And after May 1st, the spigot is closed and doesn't come back. So if we saw a sprinkle this time of year, we would throw a party. It doesn't happen here. But in the wintertime, we get 65 inches of rain, and it comes within that short period. So it rains quite a bit, and that's the best time to do your chainsaw work, for sure. Good question. Any others, please?
Hey, Mike, the PVA wood sealer that you use, has that got the same consistency as Elmer's glue, the regular white Elmer's school glue?
It does. And I think it is the same stuff. Now, it's sold by Craft Supplies under the name Tree Saver. And I think what they've done, and I don't know this for a fact, this is just in my mind. I think they found a source for polyvinyl acetate, which is Elmer's glue. And then they added an antibacterial to it. I know they've done that to it, which is good because Elmer's glue has a tendency to rot if it sits for more than a year or two in a big quantity. So they've added some type of antifungal to it, and then they're selling it as a tree saver. And I'm a big advocate of it over the other stuff because of the slipperiness of that anchor seal product or the other water-based sealers. Questions, anybody?
How thick do you try to leave your platters? Is there some kind of a ratio that you try to leave? I noticed that you left quite a bit on the tenon on the back side. Yeah, they're probably a good 1.25 inches thick. I try to always say 10% of the total diameter is what you keep. You don't do that so much for platters, but bowls you certainly would. So a 10-inch bowl should be 1 inch thick, sort of thing. So 10% of the total diameter is a good way to go, but you can adjust that. Now, the fact that it's quartersawn, it doesn't move a lot. So when you put these back on the lathe, there's not a whole lot of movement because of the way you cut it out of the log. I see. Okay.
Yeah. So you can fudge that on that factor a little bit because it isn't going to warp a lot. One other item to cover. This is my pepper mill blank, and again, if this has obviously been turned into a cylinder, and also notice one other thing. I've rounded the edges. I don't know if you can see that, but I have rounded the edges, and I've only end grain sealed the ends. Now, if I was out in the field cutting pepper mill blanks, and I do cut a lot of pepper mill blanks because I like making them, I would not just leave this 5-inch piece of wood in a rectangle or a square in a length because it's going to crack like heck. So by mitigating, by taking it out of the square, putting it into cylinder, rounding the edge, and then sealing it, I can dry this piece of wood. It'll take a long time, 2 or 3 years, but I can dry this crack free, and therefore I can make items. I can make a pepper mill that's much more voluptuous than a dry, thin stick that you typically would get for making pepper mills. So that's again rounding everything up. So, like I said, if I didn't turn it into a cylinder, didn't round the edges, I would have a lot more crack. So just something to think about. Okay, back to the video. So the rough turn platter has dry product. So 120 days for the white oak. It typically, all the pieces that I did here in February are all dry now. They're ready to go. They're ready to ship out. Internet connection problem there. Sorry about that. Just going back to whatever I just said, about 120 days to 200 days, all these pieces are dry. Now, what you're seeing here is I'm taking a measurement of my outside diameter here with the chuck closed. And I'm going to take that measurement because that is, and I'm going to chuck a very thin part of my platter blank. You'll see. So I keep that in my bag. I've got that measurement. I'm speeding this up here a little bit to get so we can go. You can attach the dry platter this way where I left that little, or you can put it back on the screw. Now, what you're watching is a video I made just for people who buy these platter blanks from me, so to give them an idea how to make this product. So if you buy platter blanks from me, and I'm sorry if that sounds like an advertisement, it isn't. Well, maybe it is, but at least they can have a resource. They can go to my website or YouTube and watch this video and see how I create this. So that's why you're watching this. So I start on the back side of the platter, get that all trued up. Now I'm using a scraping technique. It's shear scraping, but I'm on the back side of end grain. I'm on the flat side of the end grain. So no end grain fiber here to cut. So I'm really not doing very good technique. And it's not important to. As you can see, I'm just using a sharp gouge to scrape off the back of the platter. And I'm getting really good results because, number one, oak cuts clean, cuts fairly well, and tools very well. So I can use this technique, a very simple, lazy technique, and get good results. And that's pretty much how I always think about it. Now I'm using a straight edge there. This is the outside diameter of my chuck. This is a spindle gouge here, 1/4 inch spindle gouge. I'm carving in the recess. I'm going to put a dovetail right there. And then this surface will be slightly convex. But of course it won't, this area here won't hit the table. That's the key. That's a traditional gouge that I'm using right there. Notice the design of this gouge is not a fingernail. So there's a fingernail gouge there, cutting in that dovetail. Now that's an end grain fiber cut. So the tip of my tool is seeing a lot of end grain fiber. You can see it powdery surface. That means that's end grain fiber that I'm cutting. Now notice I changed the tool here. That's a traditional gouge. So it's not a fingernail gouge. The cutting edge is straight up and down on the gouge. And look at how it handles the end grain fiber here. That's directly in the end grain fiber. Now look at the pigtail that comes off of that gouge. It's just because of the design of the tool cuts the surface a lot cleaner. And why are you worried about that? This area is kind of hard to sand and sand well. So I like to cut it as cleanly as possible. Back to the fingernail gouge. The traditional gouge won't get back in there to make that dovetail. And that's only about 1/8 of an inch of depth. That's all. So if I do this chucking device properly, it'll look like a detail and not a production technique. Now I'm developing the base. Now, since this is a 16-inch platter, I mentioned I want an 8-inch base, a 50% total base. You can make it bigger if you had a reason to. Making it smaller, probably not a good idea. But people do it all the time. I see a lot of platters out there with very small bases. Like I said, they look more elegant, but they're not as useful. They're more wall hanging, wall hangings than they are utility pieces. This is shear scrape there. My tool's in my left hand there. So I've got an angle down on the scraping edge, giving that a shear angle, which leaves a much cleaner surface.
Are you left-handed?
Yes, but in this scenario, I would have been right and left-handed, depending on, when we flip it around, you'll see most of the time I'm cutting right-handed. There's the exterior profile. So we have a long cove coming into a bead, and then the base right there. So that's a fairly large base, as I said. You've got to keep this simple because the interior is going to look just like that. Now, here's the problem with the recess, is I'm recessing into the blank, and now that's going to leave it thin in this section here, the last place you want it to be thin. So what would be better is probably a positive tenon instead of a recess. but not many folks have a chuck that'll grip 8 inches in diameter. Oops, sorry, I just created a whiteboard there. So that's why we're using a recess, just out of ease. So that any questions, anybody? So I'm just going to clean up some details here with my gouge before I sand. Now I'm into the sanding process. Nobody wants to watch sanding, but let me tell you that sanding, I'm really good at it because I've done a lot of it. I am in the opposite direction here. So the lathe is spinning up, and the disc is going in the opposite direction. And the way you know that is if your drill over accelerates, you're doing it wrong. So keep the drill from over accelerating. Also, notice I'm hand sanding in between each grit to get into those details here that the power sander won't get. And I know a lot of you folks have watched me make these, and I didn't use a power sander at all. And that's true because in demonstrations, I'm not going to use a power sander. So there you go. And then I'm going to go all the way to 400 grit. There we are. I'm in the 400 grit. I've cleaned the surface of the wood with air compression. And now I'm going to burnish with this piece of paper here. Once I cut it cleanly with the 400 grit, I'm going to clean the surface off again, and then I'm going to take that same I'm going to take a worn out 400 grit, and then I'm going to crush it into the wood fiber and give it, there it is, I'm doing that right now. I'm crushing it into the wood fiber, and this is my burnishing technique. I don't use wood chips as a burnisher, just out of experience using wood chips that come off the ground and using that as a burnisher. You'll find some foreign grit in there and you'll get some scratches. So therefore I don't use it. I use sandpaper as the burnisher. And I'm pushing hard enough to almost burn my fingers. But that's a 3-ply sandpaper. There's 3 layers there so it doesn't burn. Now notice there's a little bit of gleam on the wood here. So there is some shine on this piece, and that was caused through my sanding process. And I want that because it's not going to get any shine from the finish. The finish is going to be a penetrating oil, and it will not be shiny. That's why I want to do a good job of sanding.
Do you sand in both directions?
I do. Forward, reverse, in each grit. Now notice, thank you for the question. Notice when I open up the chuck, it barely opens, just right there, that's it. And the reason that is because if it opens any more than that, you'll mar that surface and it'll screw up that detail. Right now, I'm never going back to that surface again. I'm going to burn my name into it and put a finish right on it by just making sure I made the right size diameter. Now, let's get on to the inside. I'll do the rim first before I remove any wood on the inside. I've got to work out here on the rim because, you know, we're a heavy 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch. I'm just basically taking away the sharp edges there on this is the safety thing there. I'm taking those sharp edges off. As you can tell, turner like myself has been sliced more than once by those edges. So I knock them down with a tool before they get to me. Now I'm putting a coved surface, a convex surface, I'm sorry, on the rim. Now the rim, the diameter of the rim is going to be 10% of the total diameter of the piece. So if this is a 16-inch platter, the rim is going to be somewhere in the 1 3/4 inch thickness. And that, you can live and die by that thought. And so if you make your rim too thick or too thin, it really throws the balance off of the platter. But again, if you knew the 10% rule there, that's something to know because I live with it. And every time I fall away from it, I regret it. But again, if you want to make stuff that's off balance, that's your choice. And it's a good way to make things that are unique for sure, but I don't know how long they'll stand the test of time. I'm going to back up here real quick and just, you can see an evenly spaced line here. Let's see if I can get here with a thin pencil here. See this evenly spaced line? That is the length of my bevel. And that tool is an awfully big tool. It's a 5/8 inch bowl gouge, and it's got a really big, long bevel on it. And that's what creates that undulation. And so when I go to a finish cut, I'm going to go with a much smaller tool with a very short bevel to make that interior curve. And we'll talk about that. There's more to talk about this. There's a lot to learn, a lot to think about, and we're coming up on some what I think are some important technical attributes that we'll talk about, and hopefully it'll make sense. So now I'm on a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, a much smaller gouge, to make this interior curve. And I bet you the bevel is it's probably about a 1/16 of an inch. But notice how I kind of set up to make this cut, because it's really important. Before I touch that rim there, so you've got your detail. This little area is risen up about, it's maybe 3/16 of an inch higher than this surface here. That's a convex curve there. Now, what you really don't see on this particular image is the gouge here is horizontal. So my right hand is up in my belt area, and my left hand here, of course, is holding down the tool. And why is it horizontal? It's really important to do this because the tip of my tool has a point. There's a fingernail on the top of that, and I want to make contact with that spinning object, right? Everybody knows this sensation on that interior cut on a bowl. If you don't present the tool properly, the tool shoots off and goes left and creates a thread or a catch on your rim. But in order to prevent that, I make sure that I make contact with the highest point of the gouge first. And the only way to do that is to have the tool on a horizontal plane. Because if you held the tool down, you're going to hit below the point. And therefore, it'll skid to the left and create that. So anybody have a question on that? Because that's a problem solver for so many other items when you turn. By knowing that you hit the point of the tool first, and that'll keep you in control. Anybody, no questions?
What is the tool that you're holding?
It's a 3/8 inch bowl gouge.
Bowl gouge.
Yep. Anybody, another question, anybody?
I'm sorry, and you hit the top of the gouge first?
Yeah, so if you can see the front of the gouge, I'm just going to draw, I'm going to draw what I think the front of the gouge looks like. I'm making sure that I touch that point first of the gouge. And that's why we want it horizontal, so that point touches. Also, the figure that I just drew there, I like my gouges to have a little sharper point on them right there instead of one that's long like this, because it's really hard to find the pinnacle of that tool on the right. So, and I think I'm going to talk about that subject a little bit more tonight. So hopefully that explains what I'm doing there, making sure I'm touching point first. Anybody else want to chime in on anything? Okay, so let's make this interior curve cut. It's a good sharp tool. Now I'm coming into end grain fiber, pretty heavy. The tool kind of opens up and stops right there before I hit that ledge, because that's all end grain fiber there. Now I stop and check my progress, make sure that's cleanly cut, no tool marks or torn grain. Then I know I can go further into the platter and remove that, the bulky area there. Moving everything in. Now notice what I'm doing here. I'm cutting in that direction there. And I'm not dragging the tool into the center. That's an end grain fiber cut, and I avoid it. By cutting here, I'm getting a ribbon and not powder.
What tool are you using?
It's a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. So a pretty hefty tool, and I prefer a hefty tool because if you did this 8 hours a day, you don't want to take a lot of vibration. So this tool dampens vibration, and it does just about all the bulk removal that I want. And it also makes tenons, the design of it. I'll show you the design of this as we go. So I'm going to take all this away, and then Now I'll use a round nose scraper here to finish off the interior. So I want a nice interior curve here that's got the bottom, the shallowest part of the bowl is dead center. So that's the bottom of the curve. And if you do this properly, your work is beautiful because you don't want any of that area to reflect light. So get that curve done really well. And again, for you folks that know that you've seen me do this before and I didn't use a round nose scraper, I did this again because of thinking of who my audience is. Typically, I would use a traditional gouge or a bottom feeder gouge to cut that surface. Now notice, I'm sanding the interior right there, the dead center with the lathe off. I don't want to touch that surface with 120 grit. I've got 120 grit disc there. I don't want to touch that surface with the lathe on at the dead center because you'll dig a groove into your nice tool work. So I kind of clean that area up. Now I've got the lathe moving. I can touch out here all I want because I'm not touching the same surface very often. But when I get close to center, I move it, kiss it, and move it. Don't stay there long at all, so I don't change my nice line that I made with my tool work. 120 grit all the way to 400. I'm gonna speed through that, and we're pretty much done with that platter. We'll talk a little bit about the finish it'll get, and then we'll open it up for a break and some questions. Now, two things kill sandpaper: itself and heat. So itself means I'm blowing off the surface there to remove the previous grit, because if you leave the previous grit into the wood, it's going to tear down your paper faster, and of course building up heat destroys the paper. So I always clean between each grit. So there's our finished platter. You didn't notice this, but it's so funny because this is typical. You work that hard, watch what I do here, and then I take it off the lathe and I hit the chuck with the edge of it, which is okay. This wood took it, but watch this. Clunk. Anyway, got a nice little dent in there. You need a brand new platter. So I'm going to burn my name in there, tell everybody what kind of wood it is, the date, and then I'll put a simple, easy, utilitarian finish on it and speed that up. There's my walnut oil, easy to apply, easy to repair. Anybody and their grandkids can apply this finish. So that's what I would prefer for an item like this as compared to any other finish. So that's the end of that. And we'll open it up for questions. Go ahead.
Tell us how you apply the walnut oil. Do you rub it in or do you just wipe it on?
One heavy coat with a paper towel. You can even use your fingers. It'll soften up your skin. But that's just one heavy coat, and I'd call it good. Go ahead. Questions, anybody?
Would you
Go ahead.
Would you gas with the ammonia at all on that platter?
No, I did not. No, before, if I was to gas it, I certainly wouldn't have put the walnut oil on first. I would have it just completely finished, 400 grit, cleaned. Then I'd stick it in my ammonia chamber, which is basically a 55-gallon trash can with a yogurt cup with ammonia in it. And I use store-bought. And matter of fact, I guess I'd better talk about safety real quick on the ammonia, because I never, a lot of things go by me and I don't notice, but I talked a little bit about that in that AAW symposium. So thousands of people were watching, and people were horrified that I was so nonchalant with the ammonia gas. I opened up that store-bought ammonia and throw it in a yogurt cup and then put that at the bottom of the trash can. And I had 2 or 3 pretty angry emails about how nonchalant I was with the ammonia. I didn't think to tell anybody not to sniff it. You figure that out when you're awfully young. So basically I should tell everybody, be very cautious with this stuff, because it's very dangerous. And certainly people said you ought to be using the commercial stuff, which is even more dangerous. And I found the store-bought stuff, that half a gallon cost $3 and some odd cents. it does just as good a job if you can just wait a few more hours. Thank you for the question.
How long do you leave it in there?
24 to 48 hours, and then the ammonia pretty much loses all its punch. And I've never tried to add more to it, but because it does more than enough just in the 24 to 48 hours.
Do you do multiples?
Yeah, I might stick 2 or 3, 4 in there at the time. And I've also done something very interesting. I wish I had taken images, but I had some oak leaf decals that I glued onto the surface of the platter right there in the middle, and I stuck that decal into the ammonia chamber and peeled the decal out, and it really made a beautiful contrast. So something to think about. I got that idea from, as I recall, watching girls sunbathe in high school. They made a little tattoo with a piece of paper or something. Not that I would have noticed. Questions, anybody? Keep looking.
About do you buff your platter or with paper?
Thank you for noticing that. Yes, I do. I buff it with paper. I don't buff it with anything else. Buffing it with a mechanical buffer would put a surface tension on the surface. It's a very short-lived shine. So buffing with paper towel doesn't create surface tension, and therefore what you see today is what you get a year from now. Thank you. Questions, anybody? Okay,
You said you put a heavy coat of walnut on, then it soaks in, and then you buff it off. You just hand rub it off.
Yeah, any lingering liquid that might end up on the surface, I take away, because walnut oil, when walnut oil dries, it's incredibly durable, I'd say. But when we say dry, it's not the same way we should think about it. So if I poured let's say a droplet of walnut oil on a piece of glass and I sat it out in the sun, and I dropped a droplet of varnish on a piece of glass and put it out in the sun, the varnish would be like glass. It would break. The walnut oil, I would peel it off, and it would be very flexible when it's dried. So it's kind of like a rubber. More than so, if it dries on the surface, it becomes really difficult to remove that kind of sticky surface. It isn't difficult at all, because walnut oil is an acid, and it'll eat itself. So if you ever did leave a remnant of liquid on the surface, you could take away that stickiness with walnut oil itself. Like I said, it'll eat itself. Just rub a little bit of walnut oil on itself, and you can remove that surface.
How long does
Do
it
you
take
keep
the walnut oil
anybody else?
to cure out?
Go ahead.
I say, how long does it take the walnut oil to cure out? How long before you can
Go
actually
ahead. Oh, that particular platter I would put into use all in the same day without the oil being dry at all. The oil will become part of the wood over time. If I was to wait for it to dry, it would probably take days, if not weeks, in the right conditions, because I don't have any metallic dryers, and that would defeat the purpose. So the walnut oil oxidizes really nicely in the summer, but in the winter months, just like all the other natural and chemically treated oils, they don't dry unless they're above 70 degrees. But again, I don't worry about the drying process, because the oil will dry over time. And if it doesn't, just add a little bit more. If you're taking your dinner plate here and you're washing it with soapy water, you are going to remove a little bit of the oil with that, but it's still pretty deep into the wood. Just add a little bit more, and it'll all eventually become walnut oil as the base.
Do you need to refinish it every month or so to refurbish it, or
once a year, maybe? It just depends on how often you wash it. But I have hollow forms that I've used one coat of walnut oil, and they've been for years without changing. But you do recondition them if you're using soapy water on on your butcher blocks or your salad bowls and things like that. It makes them look nicer. And I'm always a big advocate of people using more.
Sure.
Well, I think
I
you
just
got,
wondered, I had a salad bowl. I had a salad bowl, a walnut salad bowl that cracked on me, and it had been sitting underneath a tree for 3 or 4 years before I cut into it. So I wasn't sure if it was ring shake or if I cut it too thin. It's only about 3/16 of an inch thick, and it was about a 12-inch bowl.
yeah, cracks in salad bowls are no good. It's a bad deal, and you should never use glue to fix a crack. Right? If you're not sentimental about it, maybe let it heat your house this winter.
Okay.
I do. I don't let cracks in my work. So anyway, but you guys mentioned a break, and I'm okay not having a break. Chris, what do you guys think?
I think if anybody wants to take a break right now, we'll let them. But Mike, if you can continue to answer questions, or if you even want to run through some of those slides and give me a description of something that you have done and like. You had mentioned, this is a personal question or a question from me. You mentioned a dual process finish that you do.
Yeah, great. So my artistic work, my burial urns, which I'm not very artistic, but an item like this gets a couple different types of finishes. We'll say 3. So the base is soaked in a Danish oil, which would be a homemade Danish oil. And let's just let me share my screen, and I'll write the ingredients for you folks who want to make this. So hopefully you can see a whiteboard. So 1/3 polyurethane, polygloss, one-third boiled linseed oil, BL, linseed oil, and then 1/3 mineral spirits of any Danish oil. Got to be spirits. Remember, spirits, not mineral oil. So that is a true Danish oil, the one we think about. And you can make this just from items that you could buy at Home Depot. I'd buy a gallon of Dephthane or Varathane, and it's got to be oil based. And then get a gallon of boiled linseed oil in a gallon of mineral spirits. Blend that all up in a trash can, and you've got yourself a high quality Danish oil that you can't buy a better product. If you bought Formby's Danish oil or Watco's Danish oil, it's not going to be that quality. So that's the ingredients of the Danish oil. So that's the base coat. So it'll get dunked into a tank of that, and then I drip dry it, and then I'll let it dry for a day or so, and then I'll spray a lacquer over the top of it. One coat of lacquer, and then I 4/0 steel wool this whole surface with paste wax, buff it with a paper towel, and that's the shine that you see on this particular piece. Now, I think it was David asked the question about mechanically buffing. You buff that with paper towel. The reason I buff with a paper towel and not a mechanical buffer is the shine that you see here is not a surface tension shine. When you have surface tension on your surface, that means when people touch it, that surface tension breaks off and breaks away quickly, and it doesn't leave a shine behind. You ever notice when you're at the symposium and somebody's using a buffer and they show you what the wood looks like after the buff? This is gorgeous gleam on the wood. Well, that's a very short-lived surface, so you'd rather rub it in with your hand with a paper towel, and you'll get a much longer-lasting buffed surface that way. Anyway, and then 4/0 steel wool with paste wax, any good quality oil-based paste wax, buff with paper towel, and that's the finish. So thanks for that question there. I think, I don't know if it was Chris that asked that. I don't know. Questions,
It was.
anybody?
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Go ahead with more questions if you got them. Otherwise, we'll go to a different subject.
Do
Okay.
you put a different angle on your bowl gouges when you have a step down to the 3/8?
No. Let's talk about that real quickly. Thanks for the question, because that's where we'll lead right now. Now, this concept that I'm going to talk about is very subjective. It's the way Mike Mahoney looks at bowl gouges. So fingernail, Irish, Ellsworth grinds, to me, they're just hybrids of the same thing. Let's talk, this is what my gouge looks like, and I just want to talk to you quickly and just kind of look at this particular gouge. Notice I mentioned I prefer a much sharper point on my gouge than that one that I drew earlier, and that's because I want to know where that point of that gouge is when it makes contact with the wood. Also, and again, I'm challenging you to look at your gouge the same way we're looking at it here. Put the flute right into your nose and look at it. Notice the tool steel here on the side. Now, if you're using a jig, you're not going to see tool steel on the sides of your gouge because it's going to super grind the sides away. That's why hand grinding is, in my mind, much more accurate and preferred, because I can leave the tool steel on the side of the gouge. So let's clean that all off and then look at the side of the gouge. And remember what I just said, leaving the tool steel on the side of the gouge. There's the side of the gouge. Well, this angle here is, say, 45 degrees. All the angles on the side of the gouge are the same. They're relatively 45 degrees. The jig removes that surface and cuts it more at a probably a 15 or 20 degree angle. So it's super sharp on the sides. So the nose of your gouge may be 45 degrees, but the sides are 15 or 20. So what that does is the tool is very difficult to control because you have different angles feeding into the wood at the same time. So, and not only that, when the sides of your tool here are super sharp, they dull off a lot faster because there's not so much metal behind the sharp surface. So what I just said is not Mike Mahoney's thoughts. That's just basic physics and geometry of this particular tool and of a cutting edge. So some of these things that I'm going to say are counterintuitive, I know, but they're valid. So look at the sides of the tools. Also, with my gouge here, I like kind of a convex surface there, or it could be straight. I just kind of like a little bit of convexness there. And the reason I do that is because I shear scrape a lot. So this surface, when it's convex, is easier to touch the spinning object and use this tool as a scraper instead of using the bevel as a cutter. Now, any questions before I move on?
Yeah, can you talk about your traditional gouge too?
Yep, that's going to be on here too. There's another question there.
Mike, I was just saying that we probably need to kind of tie things up here in the next 10 minutes or so that we can kind of get on to the last of the meeting.
Okay, very good. I'll do that. Let's make this really quick. I mentioned the angle here being 40 to 45 degrees, and I prefer that angle from just about all the North American timbers. Now, this angle changes depending on the density of the wood. So let's say you worked with cocobolo or rosewood. You might want a duller angle there because of the aggressiveness of the tip. Now, if you work with pine, maybe you can go down to, say, 25, 30 degrees. Or you're working with a spindle gouge that tends to have a much sharper angle there. That angle is dependent on the timbers that you use. And 40 to 45 degrees is good for just about any North American timber. What else do I need to say here? Oh no, the length of this surface here is subjective. You determine that for yourself. I actually use a gouge that has a much longer cutting edge down here for shear scraping. Now, and again, a traditional gouge doesn't have a fingernail at all across it. So let's move on. And since we're running out of time, I'll just kind of show you Now the angles of my tools all stay at this angle. Now this tool is not the same tool, but it still has the same angle that we just saw on the other tool. But then this angle changes because I want to grind that back side of the gouge off to make that bevel shorter, so it makes better interior curves, or it's easier to make thinner objects with a shorter bevel. Now this is the traditional grind, which is basically a spindle roughing gouge grind. That's it in a bowl gouge there, so no fingernail at all. There's your spindle roughing gouge. That does spindle work, but it's the same design as the traditional or bowl bottom feeder gouge. This is how I get the angle of my platform on my grinder to know where I am. This says about 42 degrees. You can buy this thing at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you can kind of set your platform up and get that angle. Or you can guess at it and use a jig like this. Let me turn that down. Now notice I've got my tool planted on the platform, and I don't have a handle here, so it makes it really easy to sharpen. So while I work, oops, I just hit a button and screwed everything up. Let's go back. While I work, I'm making sure my hands keep the tool flat on that platform, and I don't let the tool handle drop, and I don't let it get picked up. Otherwise, I'd change the angle. Okay, so let's quickly go through that. I'll speed this up a little bit. Now, how do I get the angles on the side of the gouge to be the same as the nose? Now, I don't measure this, I just guess it. I roll the back of the bevel, so this surface here on the underside here, I'm hitting that first, and then I'm rolling the cutting edge into the grinder. You'll see the hot red spark that develops on the interior of the flute when I get to the cutting edge. Boom, there you go. You can see hot red sparks right on the cutting edge. That tells me I'm on the cutting surface. Notice I'm also using a ceramic wheel. I don't use the diamond wheels strictly because I want to see where the spark is, so I know where the sharpness of the tool begins. And you can't get that with the new diamond type wheels. Now this gives me the same angle all the way through just by making sure I don't pick the tool up off the platform over and over. So let's quickly get through that. Designing a fingernail gouge, this is how I do it. There's your traditional bowl feeder gouge. I'm just going to, I can make this any length I want. This is your fingernail gouge. There's a reflective surface there. You can see the interior of the flute. I want to keep it looking exactly like that. And then this reflective surface right there, I'm going to remove that, and then I'll have a sharp tool. I keep moving the tool back and forth so I don't create any heat. And then this is the sharp tool. And then now I'm quickly going to show you, I think that this particular point on the tool, there's too much of a point, and you don't want a point, you want an arc on the front. And here's how you do it. Just a little attention there on the nose, and that'll soften that surface. If you stay there too long, you'll create a divot. And we'll show you what that divot looks like. And you see, that's a good, in my mind, a well-designed tool. And now here's shortening the bevel, picking up the tool and just shortening the front. You don't need to do it on the whole thing because you're not using the whole tool, you're just using the front. Now the length of that is up to you. Just remember, the shorter that bevel, the better the wood turn. There's that tool, same tool again. Let's speed that up. Common pour grinds. There's the tool we talked about earlier. What's pour about it? Well, there's no tool steel here on the side, and then you've got this long arc across the front. There's really no pinnacle, nowhere to start the cut. And so when this tool hits the wood, it skates and skids. It's a very hard tool to control. And again, not having the metal on the sides means it's going to vibrate and dole off a lot faster. There's 2 or 3 pour grinds in here. There's your divot. That's the one right there that I mentioned. If you put too much attention right there on the front of the gouge, not a good tool to replicate. This is called the bird's beak. It's just this surface here. You've got a concave gouge basically designed. This tool's not a good one to replicate either. It's just not going to be a very good controllable cut. Now this one is the most important tool that I see poorly done, and it's strictly because of that angle there. That's about a 70-degree angle, which makes the tool not very efficient. When it hits the wood tries to spit you out. What you need to do is get that angle back down into, say, the 45, 55-degree area there. It'll become much easier to use. There's much more on this subject, and I know we want to wrap up here. Let me see if there's anything more I'd want to talk about, and then we'll get on to it. Yeah, let's just quit there. Sorry about that. I know we're running out of time. Now, let me enter. Anybody want to ask a question on that subject before we move on?
Mike, feel free to take as much time as you need to answer questions.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. So if I know that's really nerdy stuff, and there's so much more to talk about, but if there's anything in there that you're unsure of, you might want to ask about it now. Too nerdy, I guess.
How long did it take you? Because I've seen, I use the Wolverine jig because it's consistent and I can get the same grind every time. But there are a few in the open shops that will hand grind. How long did it take you to kind of get that down?
Chris, between you and me, we've got a really bad connection. I think you're asking how long did it take me to learn how to hand sharpen? Maybe?
Yes, sir. Yes,
well,
sir.
You know, I don't know, because in my day when I started 35 years ago, there were no jigs. I would say a good student of mine who's taking classes from me, everybody in that one 3-day class learns how to hand grind, and they're pretty good at it when they leave. Just so they know the variations of what they can do and their own performance, they have a lot more confidence, and it gives you a lot more variability in your tools. Real quickly, something a little, oops, sorry. Go back. I forgot to share my screen. And since you're giving me a little bit more time, let me share my screen again. The grit that I was working with to grind those tools was a 80 grit wheel, and that's the finest grit wheel I use because it's in particular as to what I make. I'm a bowl maker, so my gouges and all my cutting tools see a lot of wood. Now, if I made a smaller object like a bottle stopper or a pen, and I just don't know why anybody would use a bottle stopper, because when you open a bottle, you got to just drink it, right? But when you make small objects like that, not a lot of wood goes through the gouge. But when you turn the grain, those are also end grain turnings, and that the wood fiber on those end grain turnings is nearly as abusive to a cutting edge as, say, a side grain bowl, where the end grain is now coming into you, and therefore it's a lot more abrasive on your tools. And of course, there's bigger diameters to work with, so the circumference of that wood, the amount of wood chips pouring through your tool is very abusive. So if you think about this, a carver gets their tools super sharp. Well, as they work, a carver will work all day and see, a wood turner will see that much wood in about 30 seconds that a carver would be working with all day. And so I would advocate to use a more coarser grinding wheel than as a bowl maker than I would if I was making a smaller object. So on that note, let me go back to the whiteboard. I think I'm a little confused here. Let's go back to sharing my screen, and then I'll go to the whiteboard. So let's just draw this line here, and this will represent a graph. So right here is the pinnacle of sharpness. That is razor sharp. My tools are probably somewhere in this range here. Okay, and then let's say that that's dull right there. So the pinnacle of sharpness, when it hits the spinning wood, it dulls off like this. It drops fairly fast. Now, when your tool's this sharp, it does this, and so on. It takes a lot longer to take away that edge because of the metal behind the cutting edge. Let me get back to no share. So if you get my drift, what I'm talking about, it's kind of counter. I don't really get my tools all that sharp because of that fact. So the sharper they are, the faster they're going to go away. So sharpness is very important, of course, for your last cut. And here in the shop, roughing out all these bowls, I might sharpen my gouge twice a day. Of course, number one, it's green wood. It's wood that's not very destructive to tools. And I don't need that sharp of a tool while I rough things out. But when I go to finish cuts, I might sharpen a little bit more. But again, the sharpest grit wheel I have here in the shop is 80 grit. And that's perfect for me as a bowl maker because I don't make a lot of sharp cuts. Counterintuitive, I know. Go ahead, questions, everybody.
The front edge you said was a 40 to 45 degree. What about the top edge? What kind of an angle there do you? I know Ashley Harwood kind of advocates for the 40-40 grind. Do you have anything that you prefer?
Yeah, and I don't. No, I change that angle depending on what I make. So 40-40 is Ashley was a student of Stewart's. 40 English. Learned wood turning from England. You have certain ways you the right direction. So so traditions are great to have. I just wouldn't hold on to them. That 40 degrees is nice for the bevel of the tool, but the front angle could be whatever you want it to be, from 0 to 90. It doesn't matter. Stewart is very set in his mind about how things are done. He doesn't think about all the different variations of wood turning and what people make that might change that angle. And I've been telling him that for years, but he still loves to talk about it. So that angle is very subjective. Keep going with the questions, everybody. We got a few minutes here, I think. Because if you stop with the questions, I'm going to my cabin tonight.
Mike, do you have a preference on tool steel?
You know, it again, very subjective thought. You know, Carter & Sons makes my whole tool line, and they use M42. And I'm impressed with that tool steel. But I think there are better tool steels out there depending on what the operation is. The M2s, the M4s are much more shock absorbent than, say, M45 or V15. Some of the powder steels don't have a lot of shock absorption, so they vibrate more. And a guy like me who works on a lathe 8 hours a day recognizes those little nuances. And so I would prefer to work with an M2, M4 type of steel, as it's kind of like driving around a Cadillac compared to a Yugo, the vibration difference. So, and the softer the tool steel, the sharper it gets. So I have a lot of Craftsman tool steels here, the old carbon tools that I find at garage sales. I love those tools for making super sharp cuts when I need them, because they do get sharper than any of the other tool steels, especially the carbide type tools. Thank you.
So I have a question. So as a turner, that's what you do all the time. What are the areas that you do the most? Do you do marketing? Do you go out to sell your products? What is the proportion of what you're doing?
Well, thank you for the question. And that is, as you can see by the gray hair here, I'm not nearly as strong and hungry as I used to be. When I was a young man, I did everything. I sold at craft shows. I sold wholesale. My main business was wholesale. I sold to catalog companies, and I did a show on the East Coast called the Buyer's Market for American Crafts. And that's where I met all my customers, from Neiman Marcus to Gumps to Appalachian Springs, all these Sundance, all those people bought direct from me. I wholesaled my work. They resold it, adding 100 or 115%. Nowadays, since I moved back to California about 8 or 9 years ago, I focus more not on the finished product, but on the rough product, because I can rough out a bowl in about 7 minutes, and I can make a much better hourly wage roughing out work compared to finishing it. Then, of course, I sell my work to collectors. I'm very good at marketing. Probably Kevin Mahoney's still on. If he is, he knows us Irish guys are pretty good at selling stuff. We're either priests or politicians. So I've been very good at selling my work because I actually believe in what I do and I love what I do. So it's always been very easy to sell. And so sales have always been good for me. It's because I can sell anything to anybody. But nowadays, and of course I taught in those days, I've been all over the world teaching. Teaching's not a very good business plan. Financially, I could always make more money and stay home. But all that stuff all adds up into marketing. And of course, the best thing I ever did was the Mahoney's walnut oil, which was Dale Nish's idea. It was a college project of mine. Dale always told me that I needed to bottle that and sell it. And I told him I wouldn't because I was too busy wood turning. Eventually, my wife and I developed a walnut oil that we could use and be consistent with, and we turned it into a really nice product for my retirement for sure. So I'm not working nearly as hard as I used to. But it's so crazy. Every November, I get the urge to get the chainsaws out, and I buy a bunch of trees out of the valley, and I have them hauled up here, and I just don't know what to do with myself if I didn't know how to rough out bowls. And hopefully, maybe this year will be the year. I know I want to do more roughing out this year because it's very lucrative to sell these rough turnings. It's about I would say a $1,500 to $2,000 a day business if you want to work. That's not bad for a wood turner. But again, it's very physical, and I get young men to help me do a lot of the physical work, and so you have to pay them and all those things. Those are all headaches. But yeah, nowadays, and these remote demos are great now too, because heck, you never known if I showered today, would you? So anyway, thanks for the question. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that your business is roughing out bowls and platters and stuff now. That market has changed completely because you're selling to wood turners as opposed to collectors or consumer.
Yep. And I'm still selling to collectors when I make really special pieces. I've got a pretty long list of emails of collectors, and pretty much everything I make is sold no matter what. So it's just a matter of me making it. But the rough turnings, and I've been dabbling with the rough turnings for about 20 years, but now it's a full-fledged business. And everything you see in here will be gone come probably October. It goes really quick, and then I'll tell everybody to come hit me back up in the spring. If I tell young wood turners, hey, sell roughed out work because it's an excellent business. And of course, burial urns are an excellent business as well. Dog and cat urn, that's probably 10 to 15% of my income.
Do you wholesale your rough turn product?
I do not sell wholesale my rough turn product, only because I have such a good reputation just being myself and my website that I don't have to. So, but if I was a younger man wanting to work a little harder and make a little more money, I probably would wholesale. Thank you for the question. Very good.
Do you have a pricing calculation you use for full sizes?
Basically, yes. So I charge by the hour, so I know what my shop rate is, but I also know what the wood's worth. So just because I buy whole trees or trunks of walnut trees that come out of the valley, they're orchard trees, and orchards are removed constantly because of age. I buy those trees for about 10 cents a pound. It's barely worth putting them on a truck to get them up here. But the wood's still worth more than I buy it for. I have to charge. So let's say a 12 by 4 walnut bowl is 4 board feet. Well, walnut is worth $7 a board feet. There's $28 worth of wood right there. And then I add my hourly rate to that and all my overhead. So it's about $13 a board foot, all said and done. So a 12-inch bowl goes for about $52, something like that. And there, like I said, it goes pretty fast. It sounds expensive, but I take the drying process away from you. I take all the physical labor that it takes to make a bowl away, and it's been quite a nice business. And I don't sell cracks or anything like that. So all the wood that I get is premium. And the stuff that might crack or has a defect, it gets set aside and burned. Any more?
Well, congratulations. That's a great marketing technique, because there's a lot of wood turners that are up in age that haven't got the physical ability to cut down these trees and hunk out bowl blanks and turn them rough and that kind of thing. This is excellent.
Yeah, and there's 2 or 3 people like me around the country. When I run out in October, I'll send people over to a guy named Matt Monaco who lives in, we think he lives in Arkansas, and then Andrew Pierce in Vermont also does it. Who else does it? There's a couple more. But I always tell young people, get into that business because it's a great spot to be. But you got to learn.
I've been looking into it. My cousin's an arborist, and he lives 4 miles away from me. And he's got a wood yard with nothing but giant logs, and it doesn't have anything to do with them. So.
Yep, sourcing the wood's always been very easy for me too. I go out and shake the hands of the people who own the trees, who cut down the trees, give them wood turning gifts, and you'd be surprised at what kind of doors those open. Well, thanks everybody. I know it's getting late there in Kansas City, and I'm about ready to go on vacation. My wife has a whole week off, and it's her birthday, and I'm going to treat her like she has a birthday every day this week.
Oh, that is great. Mike,
thank you.
Certainly appreciate your time and all the explanation and the examples. I enjoyed watching just your examples that you showed before we even got started. So anytime you're in Kansas City area, let us know, and we'll have you stop by the club if the opportunity arises. I know a lot of people run into you at the symposiums, or used to, maybe more than they do now.
We'll be normal sometime, but yeah, thank you everybody for having me, and hi to all my friends there. Has anybody seen Anthony?
Anthony was on.
He was on there.
He was
on for a while.
I'm here. I'm just sitting in my chair.
Oh my goodness, there he is. Oh, hey Anthony, how are you?
How you doing?
Boy, I haven't seen you in a long time. Boy, I was sure worried about you when you didn't make it to Utah a few years back.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Everybody, there's one of the best wood turners in the country right there.
We sure appreciate it.
know.
We agree.
Yeah, great man. Thank you. Great to see you, Anthony.
Yeah, good to see you.
Everybody, and have me back again. I got tons more subjects to do.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you again for your time. It's great to hear from you tonight.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.